Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to The Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who have made radical changes in their life for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Sharon Gill, and she's got a great story to tell. So without further ado, Sharon, tell us your story.
All right. Okay. So let's go a little bit back to the beginning. Let's see. About 23 years ago, my husband and I, we started a law firm together. I was the non-attorney CEO. And we were doing quite well. As a matter of fact, at the point where I had my aha moment or my discovery moment, I guess, was really at the top of our game. I remember we had just been featured in a national advertising campaign by Office Depot because they were one of our clients. We were on the back cover of a magazine that they had been, promoting minority businesses and, their investment in those types of enterprises. They had sponsored me to go to Dartmouth for what they call an executive MBA, which is a one-week program for minority and women-owned businesses.
Wow.
And I came back thinking, wow, how can I grow my company to $10 million? That was my thought. This was in June of that year, June of '92. And I was on fire. It was such an amazing experience. And, our company was growing. We were getting awards and so on, and a lot of recognition. And then I remember just a couple months later, I just had this quiet in my spirit, this feeling of unease, emptiness. And I remember thinking, wow, why would I feel so empty at the top of our game?
Right.
And I remember taking some time off. It was so overwhelming that I took a few days off to actually fast. I'm a person of faith. Yes, I'm a person of faith. So I wanted to seek God because I felt like there must be something more to life than this, more to life than making money then. And so I took 3 days off to fast and to pray about it and asked God to show me, what is your purpose for my life, really. And at the end of that 3 days, I really didn't have a clear direction. I still just had this emptiness.
Sure.
But not too long after that, I had a dream, a literal dream, where someone handed me a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, with a scripture from the Bible. And, it may not make sense to many of the viewers, but it didn't even make sense to me. But it was almost like a mandate. And I still didn't understand what was going on. But then night after night, I would be awakened around the same time, 2 a.m., and I would see images of people who are just broken, disempowered, wanting education, wanting food, wanting help. It became so overwhelming at that point that I actually went to speak to the pastor of my church. I said, look, I can't sleep at night. I don't know what's going on. And he said, look, write down everything that you've been seeing. Just, have a notepad by your bed and just write it down. So I did, and about 2 weeks after that meeting, I had a 13-page manifesto of what later became my nonprofit. And the pastor at the time, he had a shell company, a shell nonprofit, and he said to me, why don't you back your vision into that? And that was how I started what we call the Oasis Compassion Agency 15 years ago.
Wow.
And it was a mission that works with families who are, impoverished, the working poor, people who have a gap between their income and just that next step. So they are very dependent on, they need help.
Right.
But there were ones that wanted to do better. It wasn't just a handout. They needed a handout. And I literally went to my husband and I retired. I retired from the firm, I retired from the law firm, from the business. No one understood it, but my husband saw me just being a changed person, and he was quite supportive. And he actually gave me the seed money to start the nonprofit. And that nonprofit, just so you know, over the years have just fed and clothed and trained and put back to work thousands of people, fed thousands of families. Awesome. And it did a lot. It changed me as a person. It was hard. It wasn't easy, even though it was what I consider to be a call on my life. I had a lot of moments of doubt. I remember after I left my law firm and I was starting the nonprofit, I was in a small 300 square foot spot trying to put a food pantry together. That's how I started. And they were mostly homeless people and immigrants. And I remember one day saying to myself, I didn't bargain for this. I left my corner office essentially to come do this. And I said, you know what? I got to stop right here. So even though I'd left my company, I had a moment of like, did I eat bad pizza? What am I doing here? And so I like to be true to my feelings. So I took another, almost a month off to seek God again in prayer. I says, look, I essentially said to God, I don't like some of these people. They're smelly, they are messy, I'm uncomfortable, I'm not used to this, I don't even know what I'm doing. But I can only do this if you change my heart and my eyes. And so I waited about a month. I kept praying until one day I felt, okay, it's time to go back to the pantry. And I never forgot, Shay, the first time I went back after this time, I had prayed to God to give me new eyes. And there was this homeless man that I saw. And I had seen him before. And I remember I was bracing myself for his odor, for his homelessness. And I remember that day I had no smell. I didn't smell anything. And I remember walking up to this gentleman with my hands held out. And I said to him, sir, what are you doing here? What is your story? And he was shocked. And I remember seeing the cuts on his hands. I remember seeing him being messy, but I had no smell. And for the first time, I saw him as a man, not a homeless man. And he broke, and he told me his story, which was a really interesting story. He was a guy who was working. He had lost his job. He was a man of a Methodist church goer, lost his job, got into alcohol, started drinking, lost his family, and it became a spiral. And he ended up being in this cycle of drugs, alcohol, homelessness. And for the first time, I realized these were just people. They weren't homeless people. They weren't dirty people. They were just people. And I knew that God had answered my prayer to give me a new set of eyes. Because to do that type of work, I would later realize I needed to have compassion. And that I later renamed the agency Oasis Compassion Agency. It was called Life Steps before. But with that, it became Oasis Compassion Agency. And I began to give people, through our work, hope. I began to expect more from them. I began to show them how to invest in their own success, whereby I can offer you food, but in exchange for that, how about you offering me attendance at classes? Come to classes. Let me show you how to get your computer skills better. Let me prepare you for jobs. Let me prepare you for the workplace. Maybe you need some counseling. Maybe you need something else. Maybe you need mental counseling. I mean, once you open up yourself to that, you get the entire community in. You get a lot of broken people. It's almost like an emergency room. It's like triage. Okay, you're okay. You need counseling. You need to go see a mental counselor. You need to be Baker acted. And so that became the story of Oasis. But one of the things, and by the way, when I took this challenge, when I left my law firm, this was a job with no pay. This charity that I went to, I gave up a 6-figure salary at the time, plus my bonuses, to take this project on, to start this mission, this ministry, this charity with no money. And I really give credit to my husband because, and like I said, I was the CEO of the firm. I was handling all the operational stuff, all the client relations, just a whole lot of responsibility. And he had to essentially replace me. But something beautiful happened when I made that step. What happened was when I took that step of faith, what I call a step of faith, and my husband agreed to it. Remember I mentioned to you that we were at the back of this magazine and Office Depot had been sponsoring us. And okay, well, another major law firm had seen us and approached my husband right at that time while I was making this transition. And essentially said, we want what you guys have. How did you guys get on the back of that magazine? We want that. And they acquired our law firm.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. And they were the largest minority-owned firm in the country at the time. So my husband became one of a shareholder in a big organization. His salary got doubled. Actually, my salary was put on top of his salary and then doubled. So I really did not need money at that time. It was actually paid for.
Wow.
And it's been a theme in my life. You have to take a step of faith. You have to take that big risk to really get that big reward. And even though I wasn't being paid in currency, in cash, who I became and the impact that the agency had on the community, and still having to this day, money just couldn't buy that. Right. It couldn't buy that. And I did that for 8 years. I operated like that for 8 years. And right around the 7th year, I began to feel a shift again in my consciousness. Like, maybe it's time to do something different. Maybe not necessarily to abandon the agency, but it was time for another shift again. And I think it's important to listen to that. I practice self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And I actually became the chairman of the board of the charity, hired as an executive director. And for about 3 or 4 years, I went between, my husband's law firm and the charity. And then, like Steve Jobs, this charity began to have a little bit of a mission drift. So I came back for another couple of years, straightened it out. And now, one of my clients, a woman who came to the agency in 2010, who didn't speak a word of English, a domestic abuse victim, extreme abuse with 2 kids. She actually is one of our most successful stories. She's been featured in magazines, newspapers, on the air. She was hired by us in 2012, 2013. Brilliant woman, learned English, just a brilliant background. And she is now in line right now to become the executive director of the charity.
Oh, awesome.
Amazing. That for me was full circle.
Yeah.
It was always about that. It was never about me. It was never about me being titled. It was about me being obedient to that voice that says, hey, I want you for something else right now. I need your skills, talents, and your availability for something else right now. And me stepping up and doing it. Not to hold on to it, but to constantly be listening for when next shift is happening. And for me right now, my new shift is to take, all that experience that I've had and really invest in just female entrepreneurs and women who are trying to make shifts themselves, trying to go to that next level. That's now what I truly enjoy doing at this moment.
Fantastic. That is a wonderful story. That's so amazing how impactful you have been in the community that you're in. I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing this. I do have a few questions.
Sure.
So, my expectation, just kind of hearing your story, is you and your husband probably had a pretty, for lack of a better term, high social standing, successful executives. Did that begin to shift when you said, I'm going to go work with homeless people? And how did you deal with that?
That is a very good question. And to my shock, no, quite the opposite. My work with the homeless people gave me a lot of notoriety in the community. I was on television a lot, on radio a lot, in magazines a lot, and I think it was because I was an unpaid CEO, an unpaid founder. I think people felt, I don't know, they felt like I was a heroine or something to give up so much to do this. And because of that, my first initial donors were just individuals with a lot of money. He gave me 50 grand first year. He came back and gave me 50 grand the second year. Wow. Another construction company gave me $70,000. Wow. I had a lot of high-level volunteers, professionals who came and taught classes at the charity. They gave their skills, computer people, tech people, HR people. So no, it actually pushed us even higher. We were more like philanthropists. at this point. So before we were in a business circle and being given awards and recognition and being on, in magazines and stuff, here now we were not at another level in people's eyes as philanthropists and givers and compassionate people. So, and it actually in our circle, it made people more aware of, being more selfless, I should say.
Sure.
It made people feel more guilty about being selfish. A lot of law firms partnered with us and supported us.
Wow.
So no, it was quite the opposite, actually. No.
That's fantastic. So your stepping out was absolutely the right thing to do.
Yes.
In many different ways.
Yes.
So as you look back at this period of time, especially during that first shift where you were experiencing, oh my gosh, what's happening? I'm a successful executive. What were some of the doubts that hit you as you realized you needed to take that step? And then how did you deal with those specific doubts?
Some of the doubts was what you asked before. How would people view me?
Mm-hmm.
That was a major thing. How would people view me? Because at that time I didn't see the notoriety. All I saw was, oh my gosh, I'm giving up my career, my office, my staff, that lifestyle to work with homeless people and poor people and impoverished people. So it was more of how would people view me? Would they think I'm crazy?
Mm-hmm.
But because of my faith background, I think I so believed that I had a call on my life that I kept going back to that. I kept going back to, why would I do this? And I literally felt like I had a mandate from God to do this. And if I didn't do this, it would be worse for me. Uh-huh. So for me, you have to have that strong why. You have to resolve that strong why. When you do something like this, you have to go back to your why at all times. And it has to be strong because there's so many other forces pulling at you, so many doubts. And it didn't always go smooth. I had no money my husband gave me the seed money. I had to raise money. I had to educate donors. I had to educate the community. I had to network. I had to convince people to come along. And people began to believe in me before they believed in the vision. Mm-hmm. So you have to be convinced because people have to believe in you to support you. But yeah, having that strong why is important.
So how does somebody, and how would you encourage, or how do you encourage people to figure out their why?
I tell people to get quiet. And if there's something else that you could do and be happy, do that thing. If you're torn between two things and you think this is the way I should go, this is the way I should go. Okay, if the easier way is something that you could do and still be happy, then do that thing. You're not ready. Mm-hmm. But if the only thing that can make you happy is this other challenging thing over here, then you have to take the step. You have to believe enough in yourself to take that step, knowing that you won't have all the answers when you're stepping out, because you never do. But this will make it so exciting, because you're going to grow as a person. You will change, and you won't even recognize yourself really, because you're taking such a risk that the person who you become in the process is this more courageous, more confident, more self-assured person. Yes, there'll be downsides, but there's downsides in everything. But if the only thing that makes you happy is this big thing over here, this risky thing over there, then that's when you're ready. And that's where I got to. I had the law firm and its trimmings and its trappings. And then I had this deep unease. So I couldn't quite be happy anymore at the firm. And then I had this hankering for, people need me. They need help. They need my background. They need my immigrant story. They need my rags to riches. They need what they need me. God needs me. That was bigger than the trappings of the law firm for me.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. So as you made those first steps to take that first change, Obviously, your husband's a great man because he supported you, and that's fantastic. Did you run into anybody who directly said to you, "Are you crazy?"
Friends,
Uh-huh.
friends, friends, because they didn't understand, and my employees at the firm, they didn't understand why I would give that up to go into a room that's smaller than my current office to operate a food bank. And especially, I started out with a food pantry, which is the lowest form of charity, okay, just to be frank. But that's where I started. And I knew I wasn't going to remain there, but that's where you start. You start handing out basic needs, food and clothing.
Sure.
And so that wasn't very sexy. It became sexier later on when I added computer training and classes and counseling and workshops and these other things. But in the beginning, it wasn't sexy. So it was more looked down upon at that time by friends, like, really? You're using your brains and everything that you have to do this? So that's where the doubters were. But I knew that God had a plan for me, and I knew that this wasn't where I was going to stop, because in the vision that I had, I saw education, I saw jobs. I wasn't there yet, but I'd seen it. So I knew it was a matter of time. And I actually had expressed that to some people. And my first donor was a gentleman who gave me 10 grand to buy computers to start the computer lab. So along the way, every time I wanted to expand, someone would supply the money for me to expand the space into a larger space or expand my program somehow. So yes, you're going to have naysayers, and it's tough if the naysayer is your husband or your wife, your kids. My kids were pretty good. They were young, so they went along for the ride. But you have to really know who you are. You can't do this for people. You have to do this for yourself. That's the truth. You have to do this for yourself.
Say a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of people who look at charity work or look at any type of work where you're working with other people believe there's this huge altruistic selflessness that comes, but you're saying this is for you.
Yes. Yes. This was for me. This was for me answering a call on my life. I didn't know what was going to happen really, but this was for me. I was doing this for me. I was fulfilling a call on my life and needed to feel satisfied. The law firm and the money wasn't satisfying. So this was for me. I had to go explore this. Yes, it's altruism because you're being selfless to some degree. I'm working without a salary, but really, I did that by choice. Mm-hmm. I could have gotten seed money to pay myself, but that wasn't my issue. There was something beyond the money.
Uh-huh.
And that was satisfied when I made that step. I mean, I have no regrets. I loved every hard moment of it. And there were hard moments, but I loved it. It was satisfying. It was more satisfying to me than building the firm at that point. So it was for me. It certainly was for me. And I was then able to, I hate to use the word self-actualize, but I did.
Uh-huh.
I did. And because I did, I was able to flow, that energy to the constituents who were, and let them see, look, I'm self-actualized. You can come up the ladder too. And I actually adopted that Maslow hierarchy of needs in terms of how I designed my program. Food and clothing, then let's get you some jobs, let's get you, this stuff, and so that we can get you to the top. I actually use the same model in the program because I felt like, what, God had allowed me to really, get through all these steps. And here I am now doing something I truly love, even if there was no money involved in it. So it was for me.
That's awesome. That's truly awesome. So your children were young.
Yes.
So you have we didn't talk about your rags to riches story, but you have without even hearing it, I know that you have there's this worth ethic, there's this go to school, there's do all these things you're supposed to do, but then you kind of tossed some of that and went a different direction. What are you teaching your children today? Are you trying to push them down the structured path, or are you doing something a little bit different?
I grew them up in the charity. I had them volunteer there for summers. I had them, work with the people. As a matter of fact, cool story. I remember one summer, the summer I started my charity, putting my kids in what you would consider a very bad neighborhood, really bad, and put them in summer camp there for 4 weeks. I wanted them to be a little bit immersed in that environment. I wanted them to see if they could keep their integrity, their teachings, their values, even though they were exposed to a lot of curse words, a different socioeconomic background. And they did. And then I exposed them to the work that I was doing. And that was really good for their character building years, because they never once asked me for these crazy price sneakers. They weren't, here we had some, I don't want to say money, but here we were okay, we were comfortable, but they were never kids they were never materialistic. Because at 5 and 7, pretty much how old they were raised to see how people can live, and they were grateful. They learned gratitude for what they had.
Nice.
And they learned a certain amount of humility. So yeah, but I teach them, okay, go to school, go to college, learn all of that stuff. However, follow your passions. What is your passion? My daughter loved education. She wants to go to law school, so she graduated UCF. My son, he started college and he says, Mom, I want to do something different. Now at first I was like, at college, you gotta finish college. Then I realized that I actually went back to college very late in life and graduated top of my class. So I relaxed and says, okay, what do you want to do? What is your passion? I don't care if you get a degree, as long as you're doing something that you're passionate about and that you can earn a living, make a living, a good living on. So that is what I try to instill in my kids. Nice. And just be decent people, love people, care for people, have compassion. I really push that in my kids.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So what is your son going to do?
He loves cars and he loves technology. So he right now he likes to do what you call dipping. This is like this treatment you do with cars. They call a dip. It's almost like painting, but it's like a rubber treatment you put over the car. He likes that. And he also likes building and creating websites. Oh. So he does a lot of that. Started small with his friends, and now he's getting a lot of referrals. So that's kind of where he's trying to find himself in that technology, lane, which I really try to push, because that's where we're all going right now. That's where the world is heading. So that's what I think he really likes that. My daughter still likes the legal system, so that's where she's heading.
Well, she's certainly been exposed to some of that in her family life.
Yes, definitely.
Very cool. So as you talk about the direction you went and then what you talk about with your kids, you hear a lot of people talk about, do I follow my head? Do I follow my heart? Or, do I use, my emotional thinking or my rational critical thinking? How do you have one you favor, or how do you balance it?
I consider myself a logical person. I do. I like to think things out. And I can't say I followed my heart with this move, because I was not a bleeding heart person for the poor. I just wasn't. So I can't say I followed my heart. In my particular case, it was beyond heart and head. I just felt like it was a call. That whether I liked it or not liked it, it didn't matter. This was my destiny to do at this point. So for me, I guess my faith and my belief structure is bigger than both of those things. Generally speaking, do I follow my head or my heart? I like to think things through. I really do. But in this particular case, it was beyond, it transcended both head and heart. It was like, I have no other choice. I have to do this. This was a call.
Very cool. So, if you had the opportunity today to go back and tell that young CEO who was kicking butt in the world some advice, what would you tell her before she started this path she ended up on?
I would say that include from the onset a place for giving back. I think if that was part of the business model, I maybe would not have had that yearning. I would have been doing something to support the community earlier instead of getting to a place where, okay, it's all or nothing. I think I would have said integrate that in your business structure where there is a community focus as well. So part of your company's, culture should be giving back. I think that's important, and I think what I do, I coach what we call Lady Boss with purpose, and the with purpose just means that even though you're a lady boss, it's beyond money. It's bigger than money. It's bigger than climbing to the CEO ladder. There's more to life than all of that. What are you doing to add value to the world, to add value to your community? So what are you doing that's bigger than your pocketbook? That's the with purpose part, and I think that's what I would tell a young CEO. Integrate that into your culture, into your corporate creed, into your people, that your employees. Integrate that structure in more robust, not just a little bit, but more robustly.
Sure, that's fantastic advice. So, not to put you on the spot, but how do you then, or do you communicate that to your two children as they're heading out into the world?
Well, they have no choice almost, because for 15 years, they've seen how we've lived our lives.
Right.
Totally immersed in, we have our law firm still, but we have the charity still. And at home, our life lesson time is about, okay, who are we adding value to? And we've done even other things, Shay, believe it or not, I won't go into this, but at one point, my husband and I had actually started a church while we were doing all of this stuff, but it was mostly young people. Those were the attendees. It was a mission church in a low income neighborhood. And so they've seen how we've lived our lives for the last 15, 16 years. Yes, we are business focused. We do have, a business that brings in money, but we're really heavily community focused as well. And we're faith focused as well too. Mm-hmm. So that's been their background. That's what they know. So I don't think, they said to train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart. Even if they stray a little bit, they know what their roots are.
Sure. Very cool. Very cool. So obviously faith plays a huge role in your life. Outside of the faith-based beliefs, who else has inspired you as you've gone down this journey?
I remember reading a book by Kay Arthur, which is actually, no, it wasn't Kay Arthur. It was, God, I forgot her last name. It was called Dangerous Surrender. It's a pastor's wife out there in California, Kay Warren. And it was talking about how pretty much they had it all and she got ill. And then she realized how selfish she was on the inside and how she had to surrender. Her, had to confess to herself pretty much and become a different person. And I realized that a lot of us walk around selfish, not being mean, but we're so self-absorbed that we're so blind to what's going on around us. And that was a real big inspiration for me. Like, we are in a bubble, really, especially business people. We're in the business bubble, the business trade shows, the business building, the business personal development, the business development. And we are literally blind to the guy right there. We may toss him $1 and we're blind, but it's a whole other subculture, a whole other life teeming around us. If we would just be a little bit less, like I said, a little bit less self-absorbed. So I've liked her. And I like John Maxwell because he's a guy who was able to straddle both faith and business. Here he was a pastor, but now he's a leadership guru. And I've followed his teachings over the years. I've taught his material myself. I've read his books. So he's another person who I truly admire. And those two are ones that I'd followed, when I was starting out, especially on this road with the charity.
Very cool.
But I read a lot of books. I'm currently reading one called Chase the Lion. Really enjoying that one as well, by Mr. Mark Batterson, I think his name is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So if you were to have an opportunity to say one thing to somebody who is at a point of wanting to make a radical change in their life and shift gears, go somewhere else, what would the one thing you would tell them to do would be?
Do it afraid.
Expound on that a little bit.
Because if the dream doesn't scare you, if the move doesn't scare you, then maybe it's not big enough. The only reason why you're struggling is because there's fear. And if you're waiting for the fear to go away, it won't, because it's something big that you're going to do, and it may have life-changing impact for you and for those who you're going to serve. So you're going to have to make up your mind to do it afraid. Do it afraid.
That's fantastic. I love that. Oh, Sharon, I have really enjoyed listening to your story. If people wanted to get a hold of you, websites, emails, what is the best way to contact you?
My website is sharongill.com, and my email is contact@sharongill.com.
That's fairly easy. So I always wrap up at the end with one final question, and that question is, what question did I forget to ask you?
Well, you're a very good interviewer.
Thank you.
Let's see what you might have. Well, do I have any pets? I don't know.
Do you have any pets?
I do. I have a little dog, Zeke.
Oh,
and
nice.
He's just a really, really comforting animal. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any big questions that I have forgotten to ask you about your journey?
No, I think maybe you could have asked me, is there any regrets? And no,
None.
there weren't. No.
Very cool.
No.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful story to hear. I've loved talking with you, and I wish you all the luck in the world as you continue down your path.
Thank you so much, and good luck with your show. All the best.
Thank you.
Okay.